So today, I'm going to do something peculiar for a booktube channel. I'm actually going to talk about how to write a book. So stay tuned and you can get some deep, possibly horrifying, not really, insights into my writing process and how I've written 42 books in the last 16 years. So that averages something to more than one book per year. Math is hard, y'all. Hey there. Welcome back to the channel. I'm John Hartness. I'm the founder and publisher of Falstaff Books and the author of 42 novel-length works, including Quincy Harker Demon Hunter, Bubba the Monster Hunter, and the Black Knight Chronicles, among multiple others. I published my first book, The Chosen, in 2009, and my 42nd book was published in August of 2025, just about a week before I'm recording this video. So I've been a busy boy. You can see a lot. It takes up a couple shelves, and that's not everything. There are a few missing from up there. So I write a lot. And I figured out a pretty decent process for how to write multiple books in a year. And today I'm going to share that with you. But before we get started, let me be very clear. No one person's process is going to work exactly for you. You'll find, if you've read a lot of books on the process of writing, that I've picked pieces here and there from tons of things. There's pieces of Save the Cat, there's pieces of On Writing, there's pieces of Hero's Journey. I work through a lot of different things and I've developed my process. That does not mean that it will work for you. It certainly doesn't mean that you need it to completely work for you. You can adapt any piece of this into becoming a piece of your own process. This is how I do it. It works well for me. And maybe by looking at the way I've written 40-something books, it will help you figure out how to more effectively harness the swirly mess that is trying to write your first or second or 15th book. Let me start by saying that while I have written a lot of books in series, let's see, we've done 10 Harker, 8 Black Knight, and 6 Bubba, so that's 24 books in series, not counting story collections. So we're coming close to 30 books that are parts of ongoing series. Never once have I started off thinking I was writing a series. Never. I wrote a book. And if people liked the book, I wrote more of that. If the characters resonated with readers and it made me money and people gave me positive feedback, I wrote more. I have more ideas than I could ever possibly turn into books. So if one doesn't work, okay, next, move on. There's another idea right around the corner. There are several books back here that I would have been very happy to write sequels for, but never have because nobody bought the first one, and this is how I feed my family. That's not to say that if you have a plan in your head and your heart for a 10-book retelling of Malazan and you have that locked in, that you're going to do it come hell or high water, go for it. Your purpose for writing is your purpose for writing. I write to feed my family and my cats. So we're working from maybe different ways. But that doesn't mean that none of this will be useful to you. First off, if it's a new book that may be a new series, I always start with a character and a question. The Black Knight Chronicles started because I was watching True Blood, the first season, and the character of Lafayette goes to buy vampire blood from this doughy chunk of a middle-aged vampire guy. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, huh, why aren't there more fat vampires? As a fat guy myself, I am way easier to catch. And I am well marbled. So why would I not be what we call a target-rich environment? But vampires are always hot. So that's where the Black Knight Chronicles came from. I was wanting to write a fat vampire story. So I did. And I published the first one in, I believe, 2010. And then I was like, well, if I just write about one fat vampire, people are going to think I'm just making fun of fat people, even though I are one. So then I gave him a friend. And I was like, okay, well, the classic comedic trope is short, fat guy, tall, skinny guy. And it's kind of the classic trope that the tall, skinny guy is often dumber than the short, fat guy. So I did. I made Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, Mutt and Jeff. That's just what I did. It's the classic trope of partner comedy in a supernatural police procedural format. When I saw 5 years later that they were putting Constantine on NBC, I thought to myself, "Ooh, that's going to suck." Because you can't swear on NBC, and it's going to be really hard to write John Constantine without swearing. See, I'm a fan of Hellblazer from way back when Garth Ennis was writing it, and Garth Ennis is some of the most creative profanity in literary history. You can see this in The Boys, which is another Ennis creation. I was partially right. They were not able to capture the profanity of John Constantine on network television. They were significantly helped by having the perfect actor in Matt Ryan. He was the absolute best John Constantine that's ever been cast or even dreamt of being cast. And the show was actually quite good. I wish it had gotten a second season. But I thought, well, what if I wrote a sweary John Constantine style character, but I want to put him in Charlotte? So I did. And I made him the son of Jonathan Harker and Mina Murray from the novel Dracula, because Dracula's in public domain, so I could use those characters. So that's how Quincy Harker Demon Hunter came about. I saw an ad for a TV show, thought I could do it better, and 10 years later, I'm still writing that series. Bubba the Monster Hunter came from meeting a guy named Larry Correia in person who writes Monster Hunter International. Larry's an enormous human being, like 6'6", 6'8", 3-something, big dude. And I thought, if there was going to be a real person hunting monsters, this big SOB might be good at it. And then I took his image and mushed it together with some guys that I used to work with as stagehands. So I gave him long hair and a long ponytail and full sleeves of tattoos, and I made Bubba the Monster Hunter. A few years later, I found out that there was also a character named Bubba in Larry's Monster Hunter International universe, and I was like, oh well, a lot of guys named Bubba. If there's going to be monsters, some idiot named Bubba is going to hunt them. So there is no connection between Monster Hunter International and Bubba the Monster Hunter, other than I initially built the character on the frame of the guy who wrote Monster Hunter International because I met him at a convention. A few years later, I read the books. They're not bad. He's a good writer. But everything always starts for me with a character and a question. And once I have that core character, then I start building a cast around them. I start looking at where their weaknesses are, and I shore it up. It's like building a D&D party, except I'm building the ensemble in my books. In the Black Knight Chronicles, my protagonist is Jimmy Black, the tall, skinny guy. Well, his partner is the short, fat guy. Well, Jimmy's good at punching things, and Greg, his partner, he's really smart, so he's the computer guy. Bubba is a giant hillbilly. He's good at punching things and blowing stuff up and grabbing Sasquatch by the junk. So Skeeter is his best friend. And I thought, well, I'm writing horror comedy, so let's lean into opposites. Bubba, 6.5 feet tall, 350 pounds of white redneck from Georgia. Well, okay, let's go the opposites. Bubba's white, Skeeter's black. Bubba's 6.5 feet tall, Skeeter's 5 foot something. Bubba's 350 pounds, Skeeter's about 180 pounds. Bubba likes to blow stuff up and fight. Skeeter is the tech guru and genius. He shores them up. If you're working with one protagonist, you find their holes and you fill them in. If they're new in town, let's say you're writing a book where somebody's just arrived on planet, in the city, whatever, then they need a local to tell them where the bathroom is. The Institute does this well with the character of Tim and the lady cop that becomes his friend. He's new. She's local. She grew up there. She can tell him who's who and what's what and where's where. If they're the chosen one, they need a mentor. Frodo needs a Gandalf. Buffy needs a Giles. And if they're a superhero, they need a tech guru. Peter Parker needs a Ned. You need a guy in the chair. So then, once I've got their partner or partners in fighting, then I tend to add a love interest, because well-rounded characters fall in love. They have people that they're into. Maybe they don't stay into those people for very long, but you do need that kind of real personal interaction to make your characters real. And I tend to end up kind of unintentionally, most of the time, making my relationships enemies to lovers relationships. But that's also because I write snarky smartasses, and they don't often make the best first impressions on their partners. So that happens. Then I start working on a villain, a foil, an antagonist, a problem, whatever they're going to deal with. How's that going to happen? Where's that going to come from? Once I've got that kind of roughed out, then it's time to build the book. And I use that language very specifically when I talk about building a book, because I take a very workmanlike approach to the creation of a book. I'm not saying there's not art in it. Writing is in itself an art, and I work very hard at that art, but it is also a craft. There has to be structure to the book for it to make sense. It all has to fit together just like you're laying a brick foundation. And for me, that foundation is the outline. And yeah, I just lost some of you. But here's the thing. If you want to write multiple books a year for multiple years, you really do need to come up with some way of using an outline that works for you. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to finish books in a timely fashion. I have yet to find a dedicated pantser or discovery writer that can turn around 3 or 4 books a year every year for any significant period of time. And now several of you are typing in the comments telling me who I should talk to that does all of this. And yes, they are the exception that proves the rule. So here's how I outline a book. I tend to utilize a 3-act structure. And the way I break up my 3-act structure is roughly 25% of the book is Act 1. That's your introduction of your characters, that's your introduction of the problem, and it's your inciting incidents. Roughly 50% of the book is Act 2. That's getting to the meat of it. If it's an investigation, you've got 1 or 2 red herrings or twists in that chunk. You have some kind of big turning point at the 50% mark, roughly, of the book, because that's going to power you through the second half of Act 2 and get you on into Act 3, which is where your resolution, your climactic battle, fight, confrontation, conversation happens. And then you've got about 5% for your denouement/epilogue. And you're going to be fuzzy on these chunks. Now, here's where I get really, really workmanlike, and it's going to sound too mechanical for a lot of you, but I promise there's still plenty of room for creativity in this part of the process. I know how long my chapters are. My chapters tend to be 2,000 to 2,500 words long. And I work hard at consistently crafting chapters of a similar length for multiple reasons. One is it helps me with this outlining process. Two is it's more comfortable and soothing to readers if they kind of get a rhythm of when your chapter breaks are. And it allows them to plan out how much they're going to read before bed each night. And then when you hook them at the end of every chapter and they keep reading one more chapter, you're more likely to get those fantastic emails or messages on social media where you say, man, I was late for work because I couldn't get up because I was up till 3 reading because you wouldn't let me sleep. That's the best pissed off email a writer ever gets. So I tend to write consistent 2,000 to 2,500 word chapters. So for a 100,000 word book, that's 48 chapters. That means there's 12 chapters in Act 1, 24 chapters in Act 2, and 12 chapters in Act 3. And then I go through and I make a pseudo outline. I call it a pseudo outline because I know a few writers who write tomes for their outlines. Jeff Deaver once said in a lecture I saw that he does 200-page outlines. Joe Haldeman said something similar when I saw him speak once. I write more like 5-page outlines, and I don't even really know if they're that long. I write 1 to 2 sentences per chapter. That's it. That leaves me the room to explore that action so that I stay engaged. And I am diagnosed ADHD, and it shows in my work practices because I need to be constantly figuring out new stuff. So if I plotted out the entire book, I'd never go back and finish writing it because I know how it ends. As long as all I've got is a sentence or two for each chapter, there's still enough for me to figure out that it holds my interest throughout. You see, when you spend your life undiagnosed neurodivergent, you learn these wild coping mechanisms that you didn't even realize were coping mechanisms. I wasn't diagnosed as ADHD until I was well into my 40s, and I published my first book at 37. So I'd been writing for 7 or 8 years and coping with this, and this is one of the coping mechanisms to deal with my ADHD. And I would venture that the vast majority of you who want to be writers, especially if you want to be genre fiction writers, are probably also neurospicy in some flavor. So you have also developed coping mechanisms, and maybe this one will work for you too. So that's the core of how I write a book. Then I sit down and I try to write a chapter every day, 5 days a week. I try to take weekends off. Usually I'm going to a convention or I'm doing something else work related. But I don't usually write when I'm at conventions. I'm not someone who can do that. It's not that I need my chair, but having a little bit of routine is very helpful for me to get my words done. So what happens if I get stuck in this outline? Well, that usually happens when I veer too far off the outline. So I go back and I see where I jumped ship or where I ran off the tracks. And I probably butchered all of those metaphors, but whatever, you get what I mean. So I go back and I read the book until it stopped making sense and stopped working. And then I cut all of that, put it in another file, and rewrite from there. What happens if the characters won't do what I tell them to? That never happens. I'm God of this world. Your characters don't tell you shit. You are the writer. Don't get this mumbo jumbo mystical BS about your characters telling you things. Your characters aren't telling you nothing. You're writing the book. They only do what you put on the page. They aren't real people, y'all. If you are talking to your characters and you actually think they're talking back to you, please seek help. A lot of people want to mysticize the process of writing. It's not. We are making up stories and we are writing them down and then we're polishing them and selling them to people. We're not making magic. We're not consulting with our elders and ancestors in spirit world or whatever. We're not talking to the aliens or getting signals beamed down from Orc. We're making stuff up and we're writing it down. This is the process by which I make this stuff up. If it works for you, that's great. I hope it does. If it doesn't, then I hope you find your process. And if you've stuck around this long in the video, you ought to give us a like, a subscribe, ring the bell to get notified, and leave me a note in the comments telling me if there's another process or a book on process that you really like that you think I should check out. Until next time, I'm going to go write. Bye.